And we are live! Hello, fiends, and welcome to Handle with Scare, presented by the Slash Incast Podcast Network. Our show discusses horror movies and the phobias that they emphasize. So tonight, as always, I am here with both of my co-hosts. We have Holly Hooch and Judd, and guys, we are in full swing talking about bugs in the genre. And, you know, we've had some very intriguing movies, and we just lost your radio. Oh, you're back. That was quick. So we've been kind of like all over the place, and tonight's selection is kind of one that is one of the more borderline in regards to maybe the phobia itself, but there are a lot of heavy themes in what we're going to be talking about tonight for sure.
Absolutely. I'm actually so excited to talk about this movie. This was my pick. So if anybody didn't like it, you know, we can take it outside because this happens to be a pretty goddamn good movie. And I felt really bad because last week I was talking a lot of trash about what's her name, the actress from the last movie?
Oh, Jennifer No, that was Phenomena. What was the last movie?
Well, it was Mimic.
Mimic.
And
Mira Sorvino.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I was talking a lot of trash about her because I didn't think she did a pretty good job. And I was like, do I hate women? No, I do not. Because Ashley Judd really rocked it in this movie. So let's get into it and talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight we are talking a film from a very notable director in the genre. But before we get into it, just a couple of podcast notes. We've been doing watch parties every Thursday night on Stream Lounge, which is every Thursday at around 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. And tomorrow we're going to be watching Puppet Master 2 after we watched the first one this past week. And
your new statuette?
I'll get into that in a second. But if you haven't used Stream Launch before, it is free to sign up with. They can use like Netflix, Shudder, and a couple of other like streaming services like Disney Plus, HBO Max, and it's free to sign up with as long as you have one of those active subscriptions. So join us there tomorrow for Puppet Master 2, and hopefully by the time we watch the third one, a week from tomorrow, I'll have my Blade replica in. Because if I don't have it in by then, I'll just unbox it on the podcast video whenever it does eventually get here. But anyway, so outside of that, you know, if you're looking to support the show, you can do a couple of different things. We do have our Patreon, where tiers starting at just $1 a month, and we also have merchandise available to purchase via our TeePublic storefront. So with that being said, you know, last week we sat down to discuss why it's never a good idea to genetically engineer cockroaches in Guillermo del Toro's Mimic. And tonight, you know, we throw it over to Holly for her pick. So Holly, why don't you go ahead and introduce tonight's selection here?
So I was really excited that, after the fact, I was excited to select the movie because when I watched it initially some 5, 6, 7 years ago, I actually can't remember when I did watch it. I don't think I watched it when it came out. Because that one's like pretty, I mean, I know it was in the 2000s, but it feels very 90s. Mm-hmm. But watching it again and then doing research about the movie, it just uncovers so much more about just every little like detail about it. And I don't know if I want to spill all the beans right now, but I'm really excited to talk about all the different really famous people that have their hands on this. And how I think it's a really incredibly good movie, but it's got really mixed reviews, of course. There's a lot of people that hated it. There's a lot of people that loved it. And then ultimately, if I'm going to go ahead and give my judgment even before we get started talking, I think it's a great movie, but it was supposed to be a lot better. No. They're upset. I said it. So I can give it back to you guys, or we can get right into a little bit of a synopsis.
Well, I mean, it's important to note here, we have the acclaimed director, William Friedkin, who did this, who most people of the genre will know from The Exorcist. Outside of that, he did win an Academy Award for The French Connection. And this is actually based on a play of the same name by Tracy Letts. And, Tracy came back to write the screenplay for the film and would actually go on to collaborate with the director again on Killer Joe. Now, what I love about like Sage Productions being made into full-blown pictures is we have seen quite a few occasions where someone who was on a stage presentation reprising their role for the major film, and that was also the case with Michael Shannon, who would play the role of Peter Evans when the play was in Chicago. But I believe like it basically played in like Chicago and in New York, and also like overseas as well in England. So it had a little bit of a run, but it wasn't like the most like blown up run in regards to like stage productions being made into movies. But as you mentioned, Holly, like this movie was not greatly reviewed when it came out. It was actually panned getting an F cinema score. Despite the fact that, Roger Ebert, who often pans, horror releases, gave it a 3.5 out of 4. So it didn't necessarily have complete naysayers across the board. But, that cinema score definitely hurts to see, because I definitely did not think it was as bad as what the initial release impressions were.
So first off, I would love to get just your initial impressions of like how did you react to the movie? The second time I watched the movie, so let me interrupt you before I even let me ask you a question. Say something. Let me interrupt you. I just wanted to add that when I watched the movie, I didn't know what I was getting into. It was just like, oh, it's Ashley Judd and it's a horror movie. I like this. Let's watch it. And this was again like many years ago. And by the end of the movie, I was gutted. I thought it was very devastating. And of course, I don't normally look for that. I thought that any movie that can make you feel something. Oh, I sound so sad just now. Any movie make you feel something, I'm like, yay, good job, thank you. So that's why I was really excited about this movie. But watching it a second time, you already know what's happening. You already know what to expect. Like I was a lot more analytical the second time around, which is of course true about any movie. But it's some movies more so than others, right? Some movies you can just enjoy over and over again. Other movies you get the full impact the first time you see it, and then in the subsequent viewings, it's a lot more. You're very removed from it. And again, if a movie like that is going to be so devastating, then it clearly isn't going to have that effect every time. Were you devastated?
I will say the last 20 minutes were probably the most impactful of the entire movie, just because you kind of have that, like, you see, like, the deterioration of the mental state throughout the course of the movie, but at one point, they just completely buy into it and just lose complete insanity at that point. So, like, the last 20 minutes, especially when they were in the motel room and you have all the tinfoil everywhere, and you're introduced to Dr. Sweets, who I'm not even convinced was an actual real person.
Meth smoking or whatever it is that they were smoking. I don't know.
I think he was smoking crack.
Okay.
Yeah. They were hitting the pipe. But there were just so many things that it's just like,
is this real?
A lot of it was built up so much on the performances of the two main actors, and I think without those two, I probably would not have enjoyed it as much as I did. But yes, the last 20 minutes was a definite like kick in the nuts for sure.
All right, good. I'm glad you got sad.
Yeah. Now that being said, though, I would not classify this as horror.
Oh, that's very. Yes, it's one of those movies where it's like, is it, isn't it? But I feel like horror is such a wide net.
It is.
That considering the way that it ended and the self mutilation going on, the traumatizing stuff. It is very very close to just being a thriller. Yes. But there's a little bit in there to hold on to for horror, I think.
Maybe some psychological horror.
You see? And that's the kind of shit we all live with.
Yeah, every day.
every day.
Definitely a dark movie. I feel like, to talk generally about it, I feel like negative reviews, a lot of them probably came from the fact that the movie was too successful at being this extremely dark and depressing depiction of two people basically going insane in a hotel room. And that it's so uncomfortable and dark that I think a lot of people were probably just like, screw this movie. You know, this sucks. I hate this.
Well, I know I watched a bunch of reviews because there is a surprising number of reviews for this movie for it being so, mixed reviews, negatively reviewed. And the majority of them were really positive, but there were a number that were negative. And the ones that were negative were very understandable. Like you had, these were reviewers that were really hoping to see a bug feature. They were hoping to see a lot of exciting. They were hoping for excitement, not for like get your box of tissues kind of fucking horror. So, I get that you're saying that you don't think it's a horror movie, and I feel like that's a completely legitimate feeling to have about it. But I feel like there's a lot of movies that ride that cusp.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I feel that way a lot about like sci-fi horror, where I'm like, it's just sci-fi. But I can see your point for sure. And yeah,
it's definitely multi-genre. What's funny is I looked online and as I'm sure we all did, because I wanted to kind of see about the writing of the movie and the writer. And what's funny is on Google, the play is classified as a black comedy.
Yeah.
And it's like,
what's so funny about it, man?
Like, it's not a black
Can you point out
comedy.
the jokes?
Yeah.
I get jokes.
There's a couple of Michael Shannon moments. There's a couple of moments with both of them that are kind of funny, where they do the almost like comical crazy person, but it only is for like brief flashes,
I'm wondering if the dark comedy bit comes from the type of acting that you're getting. So if you're getting more of like hammy acting in a play, then I can see it being like dark humor. But I mean, if Michael Shannon was, if he was performing this play on stage and then in theaters or on film, and if he played it the same way, then I'm not entirely sure that I guess my sense of humor isn't that great. But I just it's hard to call it a dark comedy, although because even then it's like I'm trying to think of like what was so funny about it. But like maybe if Ashley Judd's character was played by somebody who was playing it differently, then I can see it's all about like portrayal, right?
Well, like there's those elements where you had the first interactions between Agnes and you have Peter, and she doesn't really know the guy, but like she offers him like a place to crash, basically, even though she doesn't really know him, and she's like, who knows, maybe you're an axe murderer, because he does have that kind of look to him, right? Like,
oh yes, I would never let Michael Shannon into my home. Sorry, Michael Shannon, you're not allowed.
But as with the depressing aspect of this movie, she's so lonely and depressed that she's willing to take a chance and have him come and stay.
Also, her friend brings him in.
Yeah.
That's not a great friend. Really? You met a stranger at a bar?
The funny thing is the friend vouches for him, and then a few moments later, or a few minutes later, he says that he only met the friend like a day before. So they'd only known each other very briefly, even though she vouched for him.
Like, you can't really vouch for somebody you just met a day ago. That's insane.
Totally, yeah.
And also, like, nothing about him says this is a reliable, safe person. I mean, it's just nothing. Like, he doesn't even say that literally himself, It's just he's just sort of gentle somehow in his personality, but...
Well, yeah, he comes across as like an intelligent person. First, he seems like kind of a smarter, like he doesn't seem like a bad guy right off the bat.
No, well, he doesn't seem like a bad guy, but he definitely comes across as quite a bit damaged, and so
yeah. But so is she,
right?
I mean, they both are.
She's not doing that great.
This is one of those movies where everybody in the movie is damaged and messed up.
They help each other get to the lowest point possible, and then like kill each other.
This movie. So I did see this back in 2006 when it came out, and this was I always kind of associate this movie with David Lynch. It feels kind of like a David Lynch movie, but also it came out, I believe, close to, I don't know, Fire Walk with Me or something else, but I think there was some David Lynch stuff going on at that time, and it felt like that.
He was busy doing other shit. But I think he would have done really great as a director of this.
But yeah, and it feels like I always get the sense that that's why this movie got made, or
Because it wanted to have a David Lynch feel to it.
Yeah, because that kind of thing was kind of popular back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
It really was, actually. Yeah, I remember that.
And it was kind of, I think they were kind of going for that. But you know what's interesting is this theater on, I can't remember the name of it, but it's in here in the city, San Francisco, at California and Polk. And back,
Lumiere, or
I think so. Yeah, the Lumiere, I think is what it's called. And back then, they would play small independent movies, and they would do like those screeners where you come in and you watch the movie, and then they have you take you fill out questions after they ask you questions about the movie, and that was we went to that for this movie.
Neat.
So it was kind of interesting because it felt the questions after the movie felt a lot like, how would you market this movie? Like, how would you describe this movie? Kind of thing. What they were asking.
They were trying to figure out themselves, because I mean that's one of the things that was that was interesting about this movie, is that it was famously mismarketed. It was marketed very badly. So one of the things that I asked you even before we started the recording was that, did you see the trailer? Because the trailer made it look like there were going to be some bugs. Like the trailer made it look like very much so like this is a horror movie about being literally infested, and I think that a lot of people were hoping for that, or not hoping for that, but expecting that, and then the movie didn't deliver because to your point, like when you watch the movie, you're like, this isn't a horror movie. Maybe it would have done a lot better if it was marketed as a psychological thriller, and they played up a little bit more of the aspect of this is a shared psychosis. Although themselves in the movie, creators, didn't really play up the drug part of it as much as, I mean, for good reason. But you can't call it a drug use movie, because that's very clearly what's going on here as well. But it's downplayed because it's not supposed to be the focal point, which I get. But then, yeah, I mean, it's hard to fucking market.
But
How
yeah,
do you classify it?
it is like a main catalyst, regardless.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like you can't really do hard drugs and it not be a major reason why things are happening around you.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'm just a nerd.
And, what better time frame to actually do this episode than on 420 of all days. Yeah, great how that panned out.
Drugs and drugs and the nature of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at that. That worked out so nicely.
But yeah, so this Bug actually debuted at Cannes in 2006, and Friedkin actually won an award for his directing. I would go on to gross $8.1 million on a budget of $4 million. And, just talking about the cast of Bug really quick, you had Ashley Judd, who played Agnes White, who was, this lonely drug addict who was living in this rundown motel. And, she is grieving because she is suffering from the loss of her child, which was one of kind of like the side plots. And that actually plays into her ex-husband, who is Harry Connick Jr. as Jerry Goss, who is basically the abusive ex-husband who is just getting out of prison and trying to reinsert himself back into Agnes's life. You have Michael Shannon as Peter Evans, who is the unhinged war veteran who becomes close and intimate with Agnes. And, there's a lot of awkward moments between the two, and some shared delusions and conspiracy theories getting tossed around quite a bit on the part of Michael Shannon. And, at one point, when you get closer towards the end of the movie, you have that really intense scene between the two, where he's like, "What don't you know?" And then, like, poor Ashley Judd is over here trying to piece together all of the pieces that don't actually fit together, and then they concoct, like, this whole elaborate story about the government and microchips and everything, and why her son was taken from her at the grocery store, and it's just... I think we all know someone like that, right, in our lives. We all have that one friend or family member who is really into conspiracy theories, spends way too much time on the internet or just browsing whatever subreddit, and they believe everything they read to be factual, and then you just sit there and you're like, what is going on in your mind?
It's kind of hard though, too. I mean, not to call myself out as a conspiracy nut, but I was just gonna say that it's kind of hard to use logic or try to use logic with people who are, you see, like, spiraling out of control, because there's a lot of really fucked up shit that's come out, that the government has done. And it's like real things where you're like, wow, like if this is true, then anything can be true.
Well, what's interesting is that, and I can't remember exactly, I know he mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen, but what's interesting is right off the bat, the first 2 or 3 conspiracy theories that he mentions are actually real things that actually exist. And I know the Tuskegee Airmen, and there were a couple others, and it's like, I think the Bilderberg Group, and I don't want to be, I'm not a conspiracy theory person, but I'm pretty sure the Bilderberg Group is a real thing that actually does exist. Which one's that again? It's the group of where all the billionaires get together for a weekend and they all talk about, like, basically just the world and how things, like.
I'm thinking of like that scene from So I Married an Ex-Murderer.
But the thing
queen,
is,
the cardinal.
Some people believe this group gets together to literally control the world in every aspect, and some people believe that it's just a gathering of billionaires who are sort of basically price fixing.
If billionaires, they are. It is. And that is, right? I mean, like, I feel like that one isn't a conspiracy. It's just like, that's what rich assholes do, right? They're getting together to get richer, and they get richer by abusing other people.
Conspiring together.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, that's fucking real. And so, like, and the one that blew my mind when I found out was like the big one about the CIA moving, like, drugs into, like,
like cocaine and crack into
in the inner cities.
Yeah.
To fund fucking, like, foreign, like, coups and shit like that.
Yep. And this movie is definitely, 2006 is a bit early for internet and World Wide Web. It obviously exists, but it's still kind of fresh. But obviously this movie is a little ahead of its time with the conspiracy theories that are prevalent now. And it's become such a popular thing now.
True.
And a lot of the stuff he talks about is still stuff that they believe in and talk about. He didn't talk about lizard people, though.
Yeah, see, I don't believe in lizard people.
Yeah.
Can I put me down for not believing in lizard people?
And I also want to point out a cool little thing. I don't know if you guys picked up on, but the doctor and the hospital where Peter stayed that he escaped from and the doctor are at Groom Lake, which they mention it 2 or 3 times in the movie, and Groom Lake is where Area 51 is.
What?
Okay.
So that was like, they were doing a little, even like where Peter supposedly came from is conspiracy related.
I totally did not see that. Well, this is supposed to be taking place in Oklahoma, right?
I think so. They don't really say specifically, do they?
Yeah, it's Oklahoma, but they're actually in Louisiana.
Okay.
Well, where it's shot, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. Although they're supposed to be out in the middle of nowhere. And she works at a gay bar that's super popular. I'm like,
I was like, this small town's got
this small town's pretty cool, actually.
It's like even clubs here aren't that.
I know. That's pretty great. It's like, it used to be full of cool people. Now it's a bunch of professionals. I'm like, I'm sorry. Where do you live?
Yeah. So
clearly somewhere cool, but
so we also have Lynn Collins as RC, who is the lesbian coworker that Agnes fools around with and also introduces to Peter Evans. And then you have Brian O'Byrne as Dr. Sweet, who may or may not be Delusion, who is the doctor who is looking for Peter Evans in the movie. Okay.
He was great.
I think the best place to start with this is kind of like the breaking point of Agnes, because there's a major event that happens in her life, and we all have like these defining moments in her life, and not all of them are happy moments or memories. Some of them are tragedy based. And for Agnes, it was when she was at the grocery store one day with her son Lloyd. And Lloyd got lost because Agnes decided to leave Lloyd alone in a shopping cart. as she went back to the produce section to grab some onions for, whatever. And Lloyd went missing, and there's been like this 10-year gap since Lloyd went missing to where we currently are in the timeline for the movie. And I know we had, a little bit of a conversation back and forth, like questioning with Peter, asking Agnes about, when did you stop looking for him? Because, initially she told Peter that she didn't have any kids. Which, I mean, I guess technically, maybe she just assumes that, Lloyd is no longer living at this point, so she just told Peter no, but Peter still kind of called her out on it after the fact here, and then he tries to kind of poke further, asking well, do you just assume that or still think that he's alive or dead? And she just kind of shooes him away, thinking she just want to keep thinking about it. But that loss of Lloyd is really Agnes's breaking point in this movie. And, it definitely has an impact on her relationship with her ex-husband. And, they still have that connection. There's still some love there, but, he's still leery of this new guy, Peter, who has wandered into his ex-wife's life at this point. And, you kind of have that tension. And even at one point, you try to see them, trying to get along with one another. But the ex-husband is constantly overstaying his welcome at this point.
Well, he's got no welcome, and well, I have to say, this is one of my critical parts of the movie. Is that thoughts about the movie is that I don't think Harry Connick Jr. did a very good job.
Throughout the entire movie, I kept thinking he was Thomas Jane, and then I had to remind myself that it was Harry Connick Jr.
Jane?
Thomas Jane is, he's in a lot of stuff, but he was in The Mist. He's the main character in The Mist. And he was the Punisher in one of the Punisher movies.
Okay. Well, I kept just remembering him, Harry Connick Jr. from all of his rom-coms.
Oh yeah, rom-coms. Yeah.
And every time he's threatening Ashley Judd or even Michael Shannon, all I could think of was has anybody tried hitting him? Because I'm not scared of fucking Harry Connick Jr. You come for me, Harry Connick Jr. I dare you.
Kind of buffed up. He was a skinny guy. I remember back.
Yeah, when he was a singer, he got buff a little bit. It still doesn't scare me though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've said it.
And I don't know if we're there. And it's they do show them trying to get together. He's not a bad. Totally, you think he's going to be the really tropey, standard bad boyfriend, but his interactions, even with Peter, aren't necessarily that bad.
I was thinking about that a lot because it was so weird about how. Because it is a play, then you have to assume every piece of everything's thought through and. I don't want to say the word contrived seems really negative, but I just mean to say that everything has a significance, right?
Right.
Everything is supposed to blend into something and lend into something. And so I remember wondering why is he not more involved in the action, right? And so then there was a reviewer who had a really good thought about how Michael Shannon's character, Peter Owen, was actually the bug himself. He's in her home and he's infested her life and whatnot. But that aside, I thought to myself what's really interesting is that they're both kept inside of this this hotel room. Him by the doctor's suites, and he doesn't want to leave and get caught by him, and her by Harry Connick Jr. or I forget his name, and it is Jerry or something like that, right? Harry. Anyway, so they're I think he's just a device Dr. Sweets to keep them insulated in this in this hole, right? And so that's his purpose. His purpose is to just make sure you're not leaving this space. And the same that Peter's character has with you're not leaving the space because of Dr. Sweets.
We definitely, yeah. And he is abusive, by the way. I just remembered that he does hit her.
He hit her, yeah. And he's whose fault is that? She's it's my fault.
Yeah, look what you made me do.
You get the sense that he is generally not around, and then he basically just showed up because I think he said he had some reason for being there.
Yeah, some business or something.
And he's I'm staying.
He took her money.
And so he just kind of showed up because he needed to basically use her for a while to do something else. But in terms of the relationship between Jack and I forget her character's name, there's an interesting thing I noticed too, where when they first initially meet and he's showing her the bugs and she's like, I don't see the bugs. There's no bugs here. And he's like, look, and he's trying to show her. And then she doesn't see them. And then, supposedly the doctor shows up and maybe the helicopter shows up and he runs away and she freaks out. And then he comes back and she's like really relieved and happy that he came back. And then when she comes out of the bathroom, she sees a bug on him and picks a bug out of his hair.
And it's like the helicopters are overhead and like that scene that you're talking about and the camera's being all wonky.
Well, I think that happens during it, but
okay. But yeah, it's like that's her turning point. Like what you would call at the end of like Act 1, basically saying like she's giving herself over to the
now she's part of the delusion.
Now she's part of the delusion, yeah.
And she sees the bugs, which is a thing. That is a real thing. I think
there's a name to it.
Addicts,
really?
Experience that. I remember reading about it where they meth can cause crystallizing under the skin, which causes itching and makes them think that there's like bugs and things crawling under their skin.
It's primarily like spiders or like snakes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so that is like a real kind of thing that people get. And he clearly, was
partaking.
We know he was doing that to himself. Like when he remember when he pulls his shirt up and he says, like, look with the bugs. I mean, you can clearly see that he's been scratching himself, and he's saying that the bugs are doing it.
And then also, like, I want to keep giving credit for any ideas that I get from another reviewer, right? In that same review, I think it's called like These Movies or something. The guy points out how when he's also filmed from the back and how his back is clean.
Yeah, there's nothing.
It's all where he can like all up front.
It's all where
he can see and like touch. Yeah.
And he has that freak out where he does.
Yeah, and that's where you see how his back is clean. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was interesting.
So what you're saying is he needed a back scratcher to like really fully commit.
Really get at those bugs, man. How are you supposed to get rid of those bugs? They're just gonna hide on your back.
And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead too much, but if we want to start talking about like what's real as it goes on, once she kind of gets through the first act and she she becomes part of it and they become a couple and they're there and
with the microscope, is that
yeah, the microscope is so great that he had the whole lab kit.
It's such a great what do you call it, prop, right? Because it's such a great prop to see like these guys are crazy. They're using this child's microscope to try to determine these big world conspiracies that only they can know. And it's and I know that you were saying how like they were doing like or smoking crack, but I mean essentially it's the same sort of
they could have been smoking meth. It's hard to say.
Yeah, but I mean like ultimately it's like when you I haven't been around that kind of addiction myself, but that's how it's always portrayed anyway, right? But when you remove the addiction, then you just see like sort of the maybe that's it, I think we're also easy to discard people that we feel are addicts and are not, I don't know, like that like, oh well, they brought this on themselves. There's that sort of like weird, morally, blind thing that people have about people with addiction and homelessness. And so to remove those pieces and to just see like this is what's happening to two people. And like, don't think about the drugs. Don't think about that. I mean, like, these are people who are going through horrible tragedies in their life, mental health issues, and this is how their lives are devolving. And they're just like you and me, if we really think about it. Well, there you go. I just couldn't realize that right now.
And interestingly, just to throw in really quickly with what you're saying, the way they depicted it, they do a lot of drugs. You see them like snorting drugs. It could be meth or cocaine. Probably the fact that they don't have a lot of money and where they live, it's probably meth more likely than cocaine.
And it's also 2005, so maybe, who knows, right?
But what's interesting is that the drugs are also not, like, it's very clear that mental illness to me, it felt like mental illness was more what was going on than the drug use. the way it was depicted.
True.
The drug use just sort of exacerbated the problem. But sorry, it seemed like you were about to say. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm just saying, like, I completely agree with that. Like, yeah, the drugs were, they were there, but they weren't as prevalent as much as a lot of the mental issues, since Peter Evans was schizophrenic. But, like, even if you, like, remove the drug element of it, just the way that his character was laid out, he would have been able to, construct the story to help feed into the shared delusions with Agnes's character. So regardless of if she is an addict or not, he still would have found a way to, construct this story to why Lloyd was missing and, the whole government conspiracy going on and her being the queen bug or whatever.
Sweet mother bug.
Oh, but man, it's a definite turn. But I will say, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where, I get a pizza delivered and I'm like, oh, let me put this under the microscope.
Yeah, that's great. They were dismantling the pizza.
Well, that's so you know it's like hard drugs because they otherwise would have eaten that pizza.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm like, have you had food in like the last 4 days? Just
Did
eat the pizza.
Did they order that?
But she's like, I don't think that's clean. Oh my god, that was good.
And of course, you get the doctor showing up.
That was
who takes some hits off the pipe while he's hanging out.
Yeah, and you're like, is this real? And he's like, touche. Well,
I feel like he was not real at all.
No, he couldn't have been, right?
Well, Jerry, earlier in the movie, during the whole abuse scene, was telling Agnes that, he's gotten a bit of a sweet tooth. And here you have Dr. Sweet, being the name of the doctor who shows up, who just so happens to be looking for Peter Evans.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Definitely. And just the way he acts. And he's the one who also says Groom Lake, which is, conspiracy. So almost everything he does is kind of reinforces their delusion. And it's part of their delusion.
Not to mention that he also sort of puts in her mind the idea of I can help you with Lloyd. I know where he's at. So he's feeding everybody's delusions.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
The fact that that's where you really know he's not real is when he starts telling her that he can help her find her son.
I know that some people were talking about how oh, you don't know what's real, but I always felt like when I watched this movie, even the first time that I watched it, I immediately got the sense that the bugs were not real. I immediately got the sense that he wasn't part of a big government experiment, and I still even now some reviews are like, oh, what's real, what's not. I'm like, no, this is real, that's not real. I feel very clear about what's real and what isn't. But honestly, the Dr. Sweets one is one that's probably good for me to sort of play with, because that's one of them. Oh, initially when I watched the movie, I didn't catch a lot of those little tidbits. And so I thought he was real, but then watching it again, I was like, oh, he might not be real. So that's pretty fun to sort of throw back and forth.
And of course, the story is meant to, I think, make you sort of question the reality of everything.
It's a play. That's what
happening.
They do.
And I even, started questioning, did she actually have a kid? Was there a kid? Part that makes me think there wasn't a kid is that when they show the scenes of the shopping mall or the grocery store, the cart is 100% empty. There's nothing in it.
Oh.
And I thought there would be a blanket or maybe toys of the kids
other vegetables or other.
Yeah, she would have gone in for something other than just onions.
Because if she's shopping with the kid, there'd be stuff and they would just grab the kid and run away. It wouldn't be 100% empty. But then on the other hand, we saw the boyfriend. There's a part where you see a little tricycle with a baby's clothes on it, and he picks up the baby's clothes and smells it. And so I was like, oh, well, that kind of confirms that the baby was real.
Son, yeah.
But then I was like, but is he real? Is the boyfriend real? Is he actually a real thing?
Good point.
And then it gets to the point where it's is even Michael Shannon's character real? Is she alone in that room?
That's the one I was struggling with the most, because there are definitely points in the movie where, in a situation where, Lloyd did go missing and she hasn't really known how to cope with the grief, other than, just doing hard drugs for, these 10 years. Like, if she was infested, quote, she could have, started to gain these more, suicidal tendencies, because of her grievance status. So there were times where, we don't really see Peter, and this plays into later when the doctor, quote, is introduced, where he just isn't present, and then just suddenly appears to attack the doctor. So, it feels like they had a situation where you could easily construe that Agnes had split personalities. You had the one that was more violent, which would be Peter in this case, who was very self-destructive, and, we saw how that ended. Unfortunately, everything kind of goes up in flames, which was very, very such a sour ending. But it could not have ended any other way for just the path that they were going down.
Yeah,
and that was, I didn't see it coming, but then when it's there, you're like, yeah. They even had the gas tank that was introduced. And that you don't want, and that's so interesting because usually when they introduce such a big device like that, you know exactly what it's going to be used for, and it's almost like very rubbing it in your face, and you're like, oh, here it comes. Here's a monkey with a knife. Sorry, a little throwback to Phenomena, but sorry, just remember that you forgot the ending altogether. You're like. And the monkey comes back with the switchblade. Right?
The monkey kills the antagonist.
Well, they introduced the gas tank, and there's so much craziness going on that I did not consider that they were going to douse themselves, right? Mm-hmm. You consider that they're going to try to burn something down, but I didn't imagine that it would be their space, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was jarring, and it happened pretty quickly too, within a minute or 2 minutes tops. No, less. Between them taking off their clothes, kneeling in front of each other, dousing themselves, and lighting that match. I don't think it was more than a minute.
Yeah.
So that was really quick, and and that's of course the big old gut punch. So, spoiler alert. Is it an alert if you do it after the fact?
Spoiler: everyone dies in the end.
But not Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah, did we see what happened to Harry Connick Jr.?
Now he goes on to marry some young chick and do it all over again. Because he's an asshole.
He could have definitely been a real person at one time, but all his interactions in the movie were
that's
imaginary
right.
version.
I was you guys. I didn't check this out, but I remember reading in one of the reviews, or maybe I saw in one of the YouTube reviews, that apparently there's a little not Easter egg, but there's a little last scene in the credits. Did you guys stay to watch the credits?
No, I was watching the beginning of it, but I turned it off, the credits, yeah.
Can't say that I did.
And because I'd already watched it, but when I was...
There's a post-credit scene.
Yeah, I think there's one where it makes it look like nothing actually happened in the hotel room.
It was all just a dream.
Right.
Or in her head, like you guys were saying. And I remember going I should go back and check that out, and I kind of forgot. Any chance you have it on you, T? Do you want to go through the credits while we're talking?
I can pull it up.
Is that possible? Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I just have to make sure I mute.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we don't want to get copyright strike for playing audio. But yeah, no. Michael Shannon. I looked in. This was he's been around for a long time.
He has. He really has.
He worked his way up because his first several years of acting are where it's boy, man number 2.
Oh wow, he really has earned it then.
Totally, and this was one of his early,
really
starring
well.
main
I
roles.
thought he was really amazing. That's the thing, we talked about this in other movies where. You put really good actors next to really soft actors, and you're like, "Ooh, it's kind of ruining the scene." Mm-hmm. And
no, they were both good. Yeah.
Well, I was talking about Harry Connick Jr. Sorry, Harry. And then the friend RC was also kind of soft.
I recognized her. I didn't look her up, but I recognized her.
She's been around.
Stuff, yeah.
But I mean, I thought Ashley Judd did so well because she
Mhm.
does she's got this really good way of being really natural in all of the roles that
Mhm.
she does. And I mean, here she's she's portraying a woman who's you know making a lot of bad decisions
Mhm.
and who's also impoverished and all this and other stuff and I mean I don't know what her life is like, but I know that she grew up with the Judds and so grew up with money and stuff, right?
Mhm.
So like I guess my point that I'm trying to make is that I thought like she just had such a really good natural way of portraying the
Mhm.
character that you really like I bought in right away.
Mhm.
And then like the way that she escalates I really liked. I mean her
Okay.
final
So
well, she,
I pulled up the scene.
yeah,
You do, yeah. You see the room. It is tinfoil. It's got the whole setup, but like the room is intact.
as in there's no fire or
Yeah,
Do you
like there's
see
no
it?
fire.
Are there
But-
any characters or anything?
Nope.
It just shows the empty room.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Oh, I heard something that was also brought up in another video that the fire actually was a little out of control and everybody had to run out
Oh, when they were filming.
when they were filming. So the end scenes where
Yeah.
the fire going, the camera kind of pans up and out. That was from people running away, and I thought it was cool, so they kept it. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah. So they actually filmed that like on the last day of the film shoot. It was supposed to be 20 days. But they had to extend it an extra day because of that.
And this was in a high school, by the way. This was all
Or the set.
yeah, kid in high school. And on top of that, here's a really cool tidbit: the stage design, I think, right?
Yeah.
The guy who was in charge of stage design, did you see that? Is the same guy who did Hostel.
Oh, nice. See?
Pretty cool. So that the pedigree behind this movie is really high.
Yeah.
Like it's a really like this movie was supposed to be, I think, a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to say why it didn't make it quite there. I'm going to blame Harry Connick Jr. one last time.
I know I remember when they put this movie out, they pushed William Friedkin's involvement
mhm.
a lot as like, this is his movie, and it was kind of like, The Exorcist. Like,
Everybody loves The Exorcist.
And also, I have to point out, he did the very underrated Exorcist 3,
Mm-hmm.
which is
really
a much better movie than people give it credit for.
Is that the one with the guy in the insane asylum or in the prison for the mentally unstable?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, this
That
one has
was
Brad
good.
Dourif.
Yeah, Brad Dourif is possessed by the demon.
It's good shit. That's a good one.
It's a really good one. And also, not to get too much of a downer on here, but this was Ashley Judd is pretty much the first main big person to call out Harvey Weinstein.
That's right.
And it happened basically at this time. And she had been blackballed from Hollywood, and
that's right.
She basically was like, "Hey, like I got blackballed because I wouldn't hook up with Harvey Weinstein," and people were kind of at that time were kind of like, "What? Whatever." Like nobody was really paying attention to it, and it was well before the whole Me Too movement. But she was the one who kind of kicked it all off. She was like one of the first major people to say, "Hey, like I got blackballed in Hollywood because of this situation." And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this movie is among her last movies, basically, that she made in Hollywood.
Maybe I haven't really taken a look at
But she may have come back since, is the thing.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, in terms of
her initial blackballing.
stuff,
Yeah. But showing that she can definitely be a real actor. Like it's not,
Absolutely.
Because of any acting skills. And
yeah, she had a really sad upbringing too, and
I would compare this movie felt a lot to me like it felt like two things to me a lot. Sid and Nancy.
Oh,
if you've ever seen that movie about
tragic,
Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, that kind of locked in a hotel room together on drugs, just degenerating together kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then also Jacob's Ladder kind of reminded me a lot
Actually, that's a really good point. I hadn't really put that together.
and you kind of have the military thing and the helicopter thing and the drugs and what's real and not real and that whole kind of thing.
This movie could have used a tub full of ice, though. That would have been a nice touch.
I mean, were they helicopters or was that just the aliens? We don't know.
Aliens in helicopters.
Ooh, even better. Why would they have helicopters? I don't know.
Yeah, like government helicopters.
I'm not going to do your homework for you. You write your own screenplay.
Yeah, all I know is the conclusion for what was actually going on, according to, piecing all the pieces together, was that Agnes's son, Lloyd, was kidnapped by the government to lead Agnes to Peter.
Yes.
Both of them were individually infected with bugs.
Get another piece.
Yeah, and meant to mate with each other to take over the world or some shit. Like it's it's just like, wait, what?
And the bugs are tracking you, of course, too. They have nanotechnology. But yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say I wrote an article. I read the headline of it, and then I moved on about how, and I don't know how true this is, but just a piece of like the people that really buy into conspiracy theories are just they wanna have something special going on in the world, and maybe, I mean, like, that's something that's pretty obvious, right? And to think that she wants to find a reason why her son was taken other than a simple, you looked away for 30 seconds and somebody just picked him up and took him. There's got to be this big conspiracy as to why you're in so much pain.
Yeah.
Finding explanations for things.
There has to be an explanation how it isn't your fault.
Yeah. Well, and it's like the like the JFK shooting. It's like this horrible tragedy happens and there's no real explanation. And so people start trying to fill in the blanks.
And it was just one
with
crazy
conspiracy theories. And when I was trying, because I believe this movie is definitely trying to make a statement and sort of be a metaphor for something. But I was kind of having a hard time figuring out maybe what they were trying to say. But I did kind of feel like part of when I was like looking at it was you get that kind of, with conspiracy theory people, the echo chamber thing of where they just cluster together and just say their theories to each other and pass theories back and forth. And then it just becomes this circular thing where it's just you live in a world of conspiracy theories.
Oh my God, I'm so close to being a conspiracy theorist because all I could think of was like, you mean like skewels? Because I mean that's very human nature though, is to like sort of group. And particularly with people that are, like-minded in some way, right? So it's I just feel like, are just the psychology of being human just kind of lends itself to conspiracy theories.
See, you say like-minded, but then I just go hive-minded. See, you're just confirming that we're all bugs in this case. Oh,
Nice.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's a microchip talking.
And it passes like an infection from person to person.
Ooh, look at us. We're so smart. I love this.
And definitely there's that kind of toxic relationship thing in the movie too, where they are just these two like kind of broken people who have come together and then are just like really bad for each other. They're just both amplifying like the worst parts of each other.
Well, everybody else in their lives. Well, I don't know so much about Peter's life, but I know everybody else is in her life is trying to get her to heal and to move on and to just be part of the world. And here's a guy who's like, no, man, let's get holed up in this hotel, do a bunch of drugs, and just really think hard about all the horrible things in our lives and why they're not our fault. And like, when somebody is really in that space, that's all they want to do is just sort of lose themselves in the depression of it.
Because like even before Agnes kind of like bought into the delusion with Peter, when he's constantly bringing up the bugs to her initially, there's a conversation where she's like, well, I'd rather have you here and be listening to you talking about bugs than having like nobody and then talking about nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
That's why, I mean, that's what's tough about this movie and why it's not, as successful as it could be, because it's real, it's dark in a real way, and there's no like happy resolution or
I like that you say that too, like it's dark in a real way. It's not like some fantasy kind of horror. It's more like this could be you. It wouldn't take much to put you in this position. 2 years.
Well, and there are many people in real life who are in that position right now, who live in that position. And yeah, I mean, people are not, I think the average, especially if you market this movie as a straight up horror movie, people are going to watch it and just be like, oh God.
Can you imagine if you're like, oh, there's a movie about little critter crawlers in your skin and it's going to be blah, and you're like, gross, it's going to be great.
Like Creepshow.
And you take all your friends, you buy a bunch of pop, and you spend a shit ton of money, and then next thing you know, you're crying your eyes out.
Yeah.
Calling your mom to pick you up from this movie.
And it makes sense. Being a play, you can suspect that this is going to be more psychological. Than
this is so play-like. Even before I knew it was a play, I was like this. I mean, I remember, you can just feel it when you see a movie like this. Like, remember The Big Kahuna? The one with Kevin Spacey.
Oh,
yeah. That one also, like, you're like, oh, if it takes place in only two settings that are right next to each other, it's a play. If people are trying hard to sound normal, it's a play. So yeah, but I mean, I really like plays.
And I didn't see what he wanted. The writer won he's a Pulitzer Prize winner too, apparently. But I didn't see what it was for.
Was it for this?
Yeah, not for him.
No, it was one of the other plays that he did.
Which is pretty cool.
Well, like I said, I really, really like the movie. I do think that it was supposed to be better than it was, just because of all the different elements that were brought together. Sometimes the cupcake comes out all right, and sometimes it doesn't, right? I mean, this was throwing a lot of magic in a cauldron, and you got a pretty good mixture out, but it wasn't like this big over-the-top thing that I think they were expecting. And honestly, there's a million reasons why, right? And I'm not even sure I see all of them, because I'm not an expert. I'm just an idiot on YouTube.
Well, maybe you're not seeing them because you didn't share in the full delusion.
Are you saying I should smoke something?
I mean, it is a day for it.
Yeah, what was when I have to point out too that when I looked this up on YouTube, there was like sometimes on the right on Google there will be like one review blurb, and the one single review blurb that was sitting there was something along the lines of, all I could think of when I was watching this movie is conspiracy theories and Q.
Yeah.
Which is, we're definitely living. This movie is ahead of its time in terms of the popularity of conspiracy theories.
Well, it just goes to show that if you're the kind of, this is really too generalizing, but basically like that for some people that might be into conspiracy theories, it's just, well, it's hard to tell them no because there's been so much fucked up shit that has turned out to be true. But then on the other hand, it's like, it's I don't know, like, if you've got a full life and you're doing your own shit and you're not looking at this shit nonstop, that these are not things you think about that much. It's the people that maybe don't have a lot going on and because they're sad and depressed and whatnot.
Well, I mean, I will say, like, in regards to, like, conspiracy theories, one of the things that makes the movie so disturbing is just the fact that, regardless of how ridiculous something may seem to you, regardless of what your beliefs are, there's always the potential for something to be true. Sure, it might not be to, like, the fullest extent, because, a lot of times in these conspiracy theories, details get blown out of proportion, and yes, some of that is because of how many times the theory gets retold and kind of, like, evolved over the course of time. But it's just that notion that there's always that possibility, and it just makes you wonder.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, and I feel like, I always think about, like, how much does it affect your life? Kind of, is it true or not? I mean, there's some stuff where, like, okay, so the whole Pizzagate, not true, because it's fucking ridiculous. Like, why? Why? Right? And the whole, what was it? The other one, with the COVID vaccine, which was, well, they're trying to track you, and I'm like,
they're
no,
tracking
they've
everybody.
been tracking you. They know everything. Like they have, and by they I mean
Well, and they're just tracking
data
you through
gatherers, phone through
through
your
your
fucking
Yeah, the
phone that
phones.
you fucking put down for more than 2 seconds. You know, it's just
It's just this movie depicts it as well, and I think it's what's happening in the real world and in this movie is where it's all fine and good, like to sort of dabble in conspiracy theories and look at them. It's when you go down the rabbit hole too deep and you really start getting into it that it starts getting dangerous and it starts affecting your mind in bad ways. Which I think in real life, yeah, it's like, you know, if you get too much into that stuff, the problem is when you get too far into it, you get into the realm where anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, lizard people or whatever. It's just like
maybe there are
literally anything you can think of could possibly be a real conspiracy.
What's the craziest conspiracy you believe?
That I believe? Oh, that's a hard question. I don't know.
Like, well, we're talking about the group of billionaires that control the economy.
I believe that.
That's definitely true.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fairly sure that is like a real thing. Like,
It's
I
gotta
think they actually even.
Because I mean, why wouldn't it be? Because all we're talking about is let's talk likelihood, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about a couple of people getting together and having a chat that benefits them.
And having the poor fight to the death. Yeah, exactly. For their entertainment.
I feel like when you got enough money, you can make anything happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely. There's definitely like, I mean, not to get too dark, but the whole human trafficking.
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's
wealthy,
huge.
Like wealthy, super wealthy people and human trafficking and that kind of thing. Definitely, I think.
Oh, here's a good one. So remember how you told me that you watched Fresh on Hulu?
Mm-hmm.
I watched it, loved it, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
It's good. It's about a cannibal, and that's all I'm gonna say. But you should watch it. It's on Hulu. But the conspiracy there, and I'm just gonna blow it out, I guess, is that there is a group of super rich cannibals who buy human flesh and eat it up, cook it up, eat it up. And the movie's really great. The Psycho has a really good taste in music too. But yeah, I mean, like that doesn't seem so crazy to me. It's like
no, I'm a
if you're rich and evil, yeah, you're gonna eat some people.
I'm a firm believer in the idea that if somebody can afford to pay for something, then there will be a market for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if
Like
I'm willing
avocado.
to pay $1 million for X, Y, or Z, there will be someone who will sell me X, Y, or Z for $1 million.
Agreed. Yeah, and it doesn't even take like $1 million.
Yeah,
I bet it takes like in the movie $30,000.
Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm. I mean, for the dish. But you'll look. What look at it?
Yeah, you'll have to see it. It's definitely entertaining.
But this did get dark. Maybe we should pull it back and end the show.
And I do want to point out in terms of Bug, getting back to Bug, that you know, I like when they kind of switched it into the extremely stylized view where they did the whole teal and orange color scheme, which if you want to talk real conspiracy theories, look up teal and orange and just do a little bit of searching around about that idea. Either blue and orange or teal
What is this
and
about?
orange.
What are you talking about?
There's a very real. It's just the it's sort of like the 10-10 conspiracy. If you look at clocks,
conspiracy.
if you look at clocks in ads or things like that, the clock face will always be set to 10-10.
But what's the conspiracy behind them?
Well, the conspiracy is just sort of why they speculation about
see.
why they put that.
I'm really into teal and pink.
But teal and orange is in Hollywood is like everywhere. It's like every movie poster, everything.
Teal and pink.
Mm-hmm.
Totally fine. I'm not gonna kill anybody.
But yeah,
not today.
But that's like a movie poster thing. It's like a Hollywood color thing.
I would not have guessed that. But anyway, so we had our downer of a movie this week, which was still entertaining. Had a good time with it, and next week we're gonna have a bit more fun. With a B movie, like a literal B movie, not just talking like B grade movie. We're talking Stun, which was released in 2015, which is about killer wasps.
Nice.
And this
You
was
mean Japanese hornets?
which was
Yeah.
directed by Benny Diaz, which it's a pretty it's one of the like horror comedies, and it's a creature feature, and it should be a good time.
Nice.
I have not seen that. So
Me either. I'm
it'll be a
excited.
first viewing for me.
And I just think it was hilarious because we had remember the large Japanese hornets that were the killer hornets
Those,
or whatever,
yeah.
the murder hornets.
Yeah, murder hornets.
I'm like, that was like our own little B movie. I never even saw one. I'm a little disappointed.
Little
I mean, I'm glad I
disappointed.
didn't see one, but I kind of wanted to see one.
The killer bees are always supposed to be invading.
Ooh, always looming.
We always hear, like here in California, that we always would hear about the African killer bees are on their way here. I'm not sure. They never showed up though.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Some conspiracy theories just kill themselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, maybe they got
But we just look
sidetracked.
Yeah. You just saved me from making a really bad joke. I was about to say it, and then you said it, and then I was like, "Oh, perfect opportunity."
Well, if you think it's bad, don't say it. You can tell me after we're done recording.
Yeah, you can just type it in Discord, and then we'll just silently judge you. But anyway, so yeah, that was Bug, released in 2006, directed by The Exorcist director William Friedkin.
Stage design from the guy from Hostel.
Yeah.
A play that ran a bunch of years.
And starring Zod.
Mm-hmm.
Zod, General Zod from Superman.
I mean, I got that. So, okay, again, just a reminder, next week, Stun, released in 2015, directed by Benny Diaz. Make sure you guys watch it ahead of time, or watch it after you listen to the episode, whichever. Both are good in that case, but I'm definitely going to go check out the trailer for Bug after we wrap up the recording, just so I can see how exactly they marketed the movie. Because by the sound of it, by the way you were describing it, it seems like more of what they did with the Perfection.
Yes, and I'm just so bummed because it's the end of the episode, and yes, it's over, but I wanted to say we forgot to talk about the saddest sex scene ever filmed. But we'll have to leave that for another day.
Michael Shannon was naked a lot in this movie.
Oh, there was a lot of dom. That's how you know it's art.
It kept some of it reminded me of Austin Powers. You remember that scene in Austin Powers where they would cleverly mask the dog? And they were doing that a lot in this movie. It was pretty funny.
And did you guys like me try to see if you could just catch it? You're like,
there it is. I think I saw somewhere.
I saw a little bit of pink flesh. I'm pretty sure that was dong.
All right.
It's a good way to end it.
On that note, see, at least we got to find something positive out of this. Yeah,
that was before they doused themselves in gasoline.
And then I stopped myself.
You're really good at catching yourself. That's pretty neat.
I was like,
no.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a filter, so I don't have to deal with that. So whatever terrible jokes I say will live on forever. But anyways, if you guys are looking to contact the show, of course, you can do so a couple of different ways. You can find us over on YouTube at HandaWithScarePod. We have our Twitter page at HandaWithScare. If you want to reach out to us via email, you can do so at handawithscarepod@gmail.com. And of course, you can find all of our information on our website at handawithscarepod.com. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Twitch for episode number 56, talking all about Bug, release in 2006. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by my co-hosts Holly, Hooch, and John, and we'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow for Puppet Master 2, but if not, then we'll see you next week when we talk Stun. You guys take care and have a good night.